Hello there. Welcome to this video on the NLP Visual Swish Change Pattern. This pattern is used to create a new, more productive behaviour triggered by an unproductive one. It is one of the older behaviour change patterns, and because of its simplicity, it is usually taught on an NLP Practitioner course. The concept behind the change pattern is to create a new behaviour pathway using an existing behaviour as a starting point. The beginning of the old behaviour acts as a trigger for a new self-image free of the unproductive behaviour. To clarify how this pattern is implemented, I'm going to use the example of a client with a nail-biting habit. It's pretty innocuous as a habit and is useful as a reference. As with all these NLP change pattern videos, it's assumed that you've already done the groundwork as to motivation, outcomes, and ecology. Step 1. Find an anchor image. Most behaviours follow a sequence of events, steps in the process. To start building the swish process, you'll need to find a point early in the sequence of an unproductive behaviour to use as the trigger for the positive image. The easiest way to find a trigger image is to walk the client through how they do the behaviour. The Richard Bandler technique of asking, if I were to take your place for a day, how would I do the behaviour, is a great way to start. Using our nail-biting example, the client brings their hand up to their mouth to start biting. So this is an ideal trigger image. This image is an associated image. The client is looking out of their own eyes, and so the anchor image is of their hand near the face. Remember, the anchor image needs to be something that will always occur in the process and shouldn't be affected by context. Getting the right trigger image can be tricky, and getting it wrong can cause more problems. For our nail biter, if the image was of a thumb going to the mouth, then they could just move on to different fingers. So it's vitally important to ensure that your trigger image is the right one and is contextually broad enough to cover all variations of the client's unwanted behaviour. Step 2. Future ideal image. Once you have a starting point, you need to have a destination. In the swish pattern, this is an ideal image of what the client would look like if they no longer had the unproductive habit. How would they stand? What would they wear? What would they be doing and saying? The more compelling, the better. This can be a static picture or a movie. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be something the client really wants. This is a dissociated image where the client is looking at the ideal representation of themselves. For our nail-biter example, this would likely be having perfect, clean and tidy hands, and their ideal image might be a movie of them using their hands in particular ways, showing off their nails. Once you have the current anchor image and the idealized target image, it's time to do the swish process. The swish process itself consists of looping 3 steps in rapid succession and checking progress as we go. Set the start position. The start position of the swish process consists of the fully associated anchor image with a tiny embedded version of the target image. Have the client bring to mind the anchor image fully associated. Add to this a tiny version of the target image. It can be put in one corner or behind the image or in the middle of the anchor image. It doesn't really matter, as there doesn't seem to be a right way to do it. Just make sure that the anchor image isn't affected in any way and is clear to the client. Our nail-biting client would bring to mind the image of their hand moving to their mouth and would have a tiny version of the neat and tidy hands embedded in the image somewhere. Step 4. Swish from anchor to target. With the anchor image in view, quickly shrink it down whilst you expand the target image so that it replaces the anchor image and as you do, make a swish sound, or a swoosh, or whatever indicates movement. Completely replace the anchor image with the target. This will begin to set the link between the activity and the target image. Allow the client to enjoy the new state for a moment. Okay, before we go any further, I want to make it clear that the location of the target image and the way you replace the anchor image makes no difference to the end result. If you want to pull the target through the middle of the anchor, go ahead. Work with the client. They will tell you what works for them, and don't be held back by unnecessary rules. Step 5. State break. Have the client reset their thinking process. This is a vital step because if you miss this out, the client can end up yo-yoing back and forth between the anchor state and the target state, which will cause problems. Clearing a state is easy. Just engage in conversation, ask a question, anything that takes the client away from thinking about the process. It's a good idea to repeat these 3 steps a few times before checking them. It's possible to get a good response on the first time through, but more cycles, the stronger the embedding. Step 7. Check for spontaneous swish. After you've been through the whole swish process a few times, have the client bring up the anchor image and see if they go through the swish process without your intervention. You might find that the client will tell you this without prompting, as they will tell you that they can't hold on to the anchor image. If the swish is not happening spontaneously, keep looping through the process a few more times, occasionally checking until there is a spontaneous transition from anchor to target. Depending on the client and the issue, this can take as few as 4 or 5 times and as many as 50. If you hit the 50 or so iterations without some movement in the client, then you probably aren't going to get the results the client wants with the swish pattern. Once the client gets to the stage of automatically moving from anchor to target, the swish is complete. You can repeat the process a few more times to embed it fully, but that's really down to you and the client. Once the client can no longer hold on to the anchor image, the swish process is self-enhancing. Step 8. Future pace. Now that the swish is complete, you can either test it out with the client there and then, which is easy for certain behaviours, or you can future pace the behaviour. Simply ask the client to imagine a time in the future when they would have done the habitual behaviour and watch what happens. If you've got the swish pattern right, then you should see a processing shift. They might have a confused face, or they might shiver, they could roll their eyes, just about anything that will show a change in internal processing. This is a much better indicator of the impact of the swish pattern than any other method. But it does rely on you as the NLP practitioner to be hyper aware of changes in your client. And that's the end of the NLP Visual Swish change pattern. It's an easy pattern to do and is useful for many habitual behaviours. That's it for this video, and if you've enjoyed this and would like to see more, then please like and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye and good mental health.